we are going to start from where I stopped yesterday.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Okay, hold on. Can you hear me better now? Hello, can you hear me better now?
It's still the same way.
How about now?
It's okay.
Are you sure? Are you sure you can hear me better now? Okay, hold on. So is it better now?
It's okay.
All right. So we're going to start from reading data sets into R, exporting data from R, and also reading data sets into R means like importing data sets into the R environment. And probably when you are done with organizing data, aggregating the data sets, and doing some kind of data cleaning and all of that, want to just export it out of the R environment so that you can really do some visualizations on it or for further analysis. Can you hear me?
I think you really need to speak louder. You're sounding really low.
Let me let me return. Can you hear me better? Hello.
I can hear you, but it's just not so. It's not so vibrant and clear. Something like that.
You know I have an issue. Uh, so I don't know why that is happening, but it's fine, Sha. But just let me know when you can. When you have difficulty hearing me, just let me know.
I should tell you
So
when.
when you find it difficult to hear me,
Okay.
alright. So here we're going to look at importing data from external sources into R and export data to external sources from R. So here we've talked about using the combine command. We talked about that yesterday also. So the C function performs the combine or concatenate action. So the syntax for implementing this is as follows. You write the C, that's the lowercase c, then inside the bracket you put the item you need to append together. It can either be a number that is maybe integer, maybe floating number, or a string, but it can't be the two at the same time. So you can append as much as possible. Then after that, you can assign it to a particular object. So it doesn't matter. As you can see, equality sign was used there. You can also use the less than and minus sign to append and to assign to an object or a variable. So here I use a vector of numbers as assigned to data one, to an object called data one. So entering numerical items as data. So I support various data types from numbers, strings, dates, and all of that. So as we have already assigned in the previous slide, if I just type data one after the greater sign, I have a prompt symbol. I can just see my output in the console here, as you can see here. I can also append to that particular data. Look at this data too. So I concatenated data one with several other numbers, say 4, 5, 7, 3, 4. Now, this data one that you are seeing here is the one here. So I can put this in another combined function and append extra numbers to it. So data 2 is going to be data 1, which is all of this, and these numbers 4, 5, 7, 3, 4. And this is what you have here. I combine this with this to have data 2. So I can also do that. Also, likewise, entering text items as data. So for this vector called A1, I concatenated or combined 4 days, like their short form, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You can see I have only string here. So if I call day one, I can see what I have inputted in the combine function. Then I can also join text values I have did in the previous slide. So I'm combining day one and Friday. Now this one doesn't have Friday, so I just combine Friday with this guy so that I can just have. So as you can see, I assign day one is equals to combine day one and Friday. So this day one has already overridden this day one that is here. So it's, the way I wrote it is the same as what is here. So if you are calling day one here, it's going to be Monday to Friday and not Monday to Thursday any longer. So like you have overridden what you have here, since you are assigning to day one. So what am I trying to say in essence? Let me try to open my lab. So let me try to get the virtual machine. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that if I should assign a value to, let's say, an object called A, let's say A is equal to 2. Then if I should go a step further to say, okay, A is equal to 5, and I run that command. So the first instance where I have A is equal to 2 will no longer hold. That instance will no longer hold. So it's the second instance where I assigned A to be equal to 5 that I'm going to have. So A will no longer be 2, then A is going to be 5. So that I'm trying to say here that the day one is Monday to Thursday here, but now, and I said day one is now combined day one and Friday. So day one is no longer Monday to Thursday, and day one is now Monday to Friday because I've concatenated day one with Friday. Let me open my house studio for my virtual lab, and just extend this. So for example, if I should say A is equal to 2, and I run this, you can see inside this console we have A to be assigned to 2. If I call A, you can see that A is 2. Now if I say A is equal to A plus 3, for instance, if I put a space, that doesn't matter. So here A is 2. Now I'm not saying A is equal to A plus 2. What I'm saying in essence is that I'm saying A is what? 2, because A is formally 2. So A is 2 plus 3, that's 5. So A is going to be 5 now. If I should call A, instead of giving 8 with 2, A is going to be 5. As you can see, so this letter A has overridden this previous A. So that's what we're trying to say in essence. Okay, now moving on to the next slide. So using the scan command. So the scan command can be used to enter text into data sets, not only text, also number. So this command can also be used to with the clipboard to take data from files as follows. So I have file name is equals to scan in the syntax for using the scan command. So this one is that allows you to like maybe just as you have in Power BI, I'll just say enter data. So if I go to enter data in Power BI, I should be able to manually input my data there without having to use maybe the C, maybe to connect to existing data. I can manually enter my data as the way I can do it in Excel spreadsheet. So for instance, here is a parameter that scan command can take. Say scan into bracket what is equals to character. So what I mean is what I want to put inside here is going to be a character, not like a number. So let's try that. When I say file, so file name as it's called here is equals to scan. So if I should run this now you can see the prompts I have here. Tell me that I can put whatever I like here. So let me say I want to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And let me see what's gonna happen. So maybe I'm done. You can see if I press enter, it gives me like I've entered 10 items. So it's giving me 11th line. But if I should press enter again, I was going to assume that you are done entering your data, um, your values. So it's going to save it to the object file name that you have already created. If I want to continue, I'll continue typing again, say 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, say 18. If I press an enter, you can say it gave me another form 19 that you want to continue. So if I'm no longer continuing what I want to type, I'll just press enter again. Then it's already saved. You can see it here that get 18 items because I already inserted 18 items into it. So if I should type file name now, you have these values that I've already typed. But automatically, what it does is that automatically it assumes that your values are being separated by space if you don't specify the separator. So another way you can do that is okay, I can say scan, then into brackets, I think I should be able to the command separator equals to say comma. So if I put separator to the comma, it's going to assume that whatever values I'm entering, I'll be separating each of them by a comma. So that means it's going to assume that after I put a comma, then since you're going to want to type another value in that. So let me run this. So I have a prompt. I put 1, then if I want to type another value, I'll put a comma, then I put 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I press enter, it assumes I want to put another value. Say you still want to enter some value. Say you got the 8th line for you. But then I'm done. I'll just press enter. You can see 7 lines. So you get 7 items. So it gave me 1 to 7. But it's understood that I want to separate my values by a comma. I can separate by any kind of separator. I can say, okay, I don't want to separate by a comma. You can want to separate by a semicolon. So let's see what's going to happen. So if I should do 1, I can put them comes in the command line. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So it's telling me that do you want to enter the 6th item? No, I'm done. Enter. And I have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Because I'll define the separator as semicolon. So any which way you want to feel about this, it's actually fine. So that's one way of entering a vector in what we call it in using the scan command. Do you understand that? Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, do we understand what I just did? Okay. So moving to the next slide, so using the clipboard to make data. So the scan command can be used with programs such as spreadsheets for entering data into R. The steps to import data are, so if the spreadsheet data is in the form of numbers, simply type command in R as usual before switching to the spreadsheet containing the data. Highlight the necessary cells in the spreadsheet and copy them to the clipboard. So return to R and paste the data from the clipboard into R as usual. R awaits until a blank line is entered before sending the data entry. So you can continue to copy and paste item data as required. To enter a blank line until to complete data entry as you have did earlier before. So what we're trying to say is that, so if I want to, I already talked about this. So if I want to enter data using the clipboard, so maybe I want to, let me go back to say scan. Maybe what I want to just enter so let me go to Notepad, for example. So scan just take automatically takes value just like vector, so it can only have one character at a time. So I can say if I have my values in Notepad like this, what I want to enter, I add it in Notepad. I can just copy this reading. After I've run this guy here, I can just copy like this. So this is not going to work out because I didn't specify that it's going to be separated by comma. So if I should do that, there is an error. So let me do it again and put separator as comma. By default, it takes space. So let me paste again then. As you can see, the data has been inserted and it has got 15 items according to what I pasted in. Now here we can also use the file parameter. Say, okay, I'm to scan a particular file. I'll just browse. It's just enable you to browse through a file and just get it for you. So it shows the syntax of scan command to import data from file in a system memory. So I can do this. So for instance, and if I should do this now, so I will say scan to file goes to, I don't know the name of the file. So another way you can do this, I don't know the name of the file. Let me get my working directory using the get wd command. So get wd command is to get working directory. So let me run this guy. It's telling me that home slash home slash is the user. So let me see what I have from here. Under my files, I have data set. I don't think I have. I don't have text file here. I only have a CSV file. So let me see what I can get this data. Employees.csv. So let me see. But I'm going to have issue with this guy. So let me just specify. So scan. This is the file. This goes to employees.csv. Then I will have to say specify separator is equals to comma. But if I should run this guy now, so the reason why I'm having error here is that you cannot work with this kind of format unless the data inside are maybe fully text or fully numbers. So you cannot read like a spreadsheet, like a table format of data or the normal Excel kind of data, unless all what is there are all numbers or characters. So scan can only work like vector form of data. So for example, I want to pick a text, maybe just a random TXT file. I can say, and I don't know the position or the directory where the file is. I can say file dot choose, then I put brackets, yeah. So I put file dot choose function inside the scan command. So if I should run this guy, it gives me this windows where I can browse through the file I want to select. Let me go into this file. Let me see data set. I want to select this file, ability.txt, and I click on open. Okay. It said, so the reason I'm having this error is that it said is expecting a number, but it got a string. So I have to put command there that what is equals to character. I think I will have character in that tab. So let's run this again. Then let me open this guy. So you can see it shared 4 items into the screen. So I have my text file, Victor, Mamadou, Shugala, Susan in this regard. So that's another way to use the scan command. Do you understand what I've been doing since? Hello? Hello?
Hi, I understand. You're trying to read a file from a .csv file.
No, this is not a CSV file. The one I just read now is not a CSV file. It was a TXT file. It was a
Oh,
TXT file.
okay.
So let me run it again. It, under data sets ability.txt. So it's only text that is there. So that's why I put what is equals to character. Because if I don't put this, it's going to assume that you want to import a number. But what I have here is just text. So it can only take all text or all numbers. It cannot take both at the time. So that's why this one didn't the former CSV file I want to open didn't work out. But let's I want to use this dictionary.txt. So if it is only text value that there, then it's going to work out. So let's even if it's real number, my so let's just open it. So you can see it's loaded all the text that are inside it as a vector. So much of them. It's just so large. So it get all the content inside that file like this way. So so that's the experience of the scan command also. So I already explain what getWD is. It gives you the current working directory of your app environment. Now, oh sorry, Petra, how are you doing?
Hi.
Okay, you're a bit late today.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so here, uh, the Windows and Macintosh operating system provides alternative method for selection of the file. So using the file dot choose as part of scan command, this opens a window for file selection as follows. I think I've already explained this one, but it gives you the flexibility to browse through files. You can use this with, okay, when we get there, we'll talk about it anyways. So we can use it, yeah, you can use it with the CSV, with the table, with the router, with the file, what kind of file you want to load. So the scan command is helping reading simple vectors. Like I said earlier, you can only read maybe a character or or a number. You can't read like spreadsheet kind of data sets using the scan command. So to read data with from bigger files, the following command can be used in R. Read the CSV, read the table, read the delimiter. They have a lot of them. Read underscore JSON if you want to import JSON files anyways. So for reading from CSV file, use this. For reading from tables, reading for tabs of related value, you can use all of this. Also, Talking about missing values in data files. So in the real world, samples are often of unequal size. So let us consider two samples, say mole and unmole. The mole sample contains 5 values, whereas the unmole sample contains 4 values. When this data is read into R from a spreadsheet or text file, the program recognizes multiple columns of data and sets them accordingly. So R converts data into a neat rectangular item and fills in any gaps with NA. So NA basically means not applicable, not available, and stuff like that. So what we're saying in essence is that maybe you have two vectors and they both now arrange both of them like from a kind of data frame together. Then so if they are different lengths, so let's say A is of length 5, B is of length 4. So that part of A that is not complete is going to be filled with NA so that it can be compatible for a data frame. So there isn't more or more data set, for example. Also, exporting data from R. So if you are importing data into R, you use read.csv, read.table, and all of that. But if you want to export, you use write instead of read. So if you are using a table, you can say write.table and put in the file you are trying to export and put inside this space the name of the file you want it to be like the format of which you want it to be exported. It is separated by tab with this go name, go.name equals false if you don't want all the row names to be attended to the file. So the write table command is used with the following arguments, all of this. So I think I already explained that. We're going to see how that works out when we start working on this. So before we go to this, let's go to virtual lab environment. So let's see, I want to read the employees data set, for example. So employees is equals to read.csv is a CSV file. Then I say, I'll just put in quotes, employees .csv. Now I'm not putting the part of where the employees.csv is because it's in my current working directory. As you can see under files, you can see employees.csv here. So I should be able to load it directly without having to specify the path. And I don't think I need any other parameters except from this. So let me just load it. So it has been loaded. If I want to see what's inside everything, I can just type employees and just run it. And I can see what's inside the employees table. Like this. So it doesn't have an header, so you just give it I'll just give it an header by itself. So you just give it an header automatically. X, V1, V2, blah, 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 like that. So if I just want to see the head, obviously the head is going to return the first 6 rows. But since we just have 5 rows here, I can specify that, okay, the head of my employees should just employees. Then the second parameter is going to be the number of rows you want it to return. If I want it to return just 2 rows, I just put comma 2 here. So let me run it. As you can see, it just gave me 2 rows automatically. So that's why to apply the head command. You can also use tail command, tail function. So tail employees. This is to see the last rows. Automatically, it's like the last 6 rows. But if I want to see the last 2 rows, I can put 2 here and give me the last 2, as you can see on my screen. So apparently, look at the way this employees data set is being reported. Probably I don't want it. Look at this guy. Look at this, like our row index. I also have a row index automatically given by R here. So like a duplicate. Let's need this guy. Let's say I want to remove this guy, this particular first row. Is the way I can do it. You can see employees. And as my employees is now equals to employees. Then so now to remove the first column. If I put a comma here, I'm already going to indexing in data frames. So if I put a comma here, anything to my left is my row, anything to my right is my column. So if I don't put anything to my left here, it means I want to select all the rows If I don't put anything to my right, it means I want to select all the columns. But here I want to select all the rows, but exclude the first column. So I'm going to put a -1. Do you understand? So I put a -1, it means I want to exclude the first column. I want to select the rows excluding the first column. But if I want to exclude maybe 2 or 3 columns, then I have to put it in a vector. So I'll now put minus, then I'll use the combine function and put the index I want to exclude. Say if I want to exclude the first, third, and fourth column, then I can do this. So this is going to exclude the first, third, and the fourth column. But since I'm just excluding only one column, I don't use the seek command, then I'll just use -1. So this is going to call all the rows in the employees table, but excluding the first column, which is this column X. So if I should run this command, it's going to assign it to what employees. So my new employee is going to be everything here except the first column. So let me run this. Okay, so let me call my employees table again so that I can see what is inside. You can see that the column X is no longer there. Are we together? Hello, are we together?
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm satisfied with what I have here, then probably I can just maybe save. Maybe this is just what I want to do with the employees table, and I want to save it back. So originally this is what my employees table looks like, but I've made changes to it to have this guy. So I want to save these changes and export it to my working directory. So I can just say write.csv. So CSV file write.csv, then so I'll type write.csv, then into brackets. Then I specify the object, which is what employees. Employees. Then I'll specify the name of the file I want it to be saved as. So I'll put it in quotes. Say employee. Employee without maybe without AS. Because I already have one employees here. So I'll just put employee.csv. Then let me call it employees1 to be different from that one that I have there. Then I'll specify one last command, which is row.names. 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 What am I putting? Code of view. Row.names is equals to false. So I'll just put F. So what does mean equals false means that I don't want this row index. All this 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want it to be part of my file. I just want all these columns. So if I should run this now, so let me run this command. Automatically, it's going to save it to my working directory. So you'll be able to find this particular file called employees.1.csv. So if I should go to my file again, I should be able to find it here. You can see it here, employees1.csv, right? So that's fantastic. So let's go back to our slide. So saving your work in R. So to create data items and results, we will need to be saved to the Git in order to work on them later. So several methods I'm used to save the work. Saving to the Git or saving to a text file. So data can be saved to files on the disk using the save command. So if I want to save some objects of the, I say save and put maybe the objects in the list. Then I can give it a name as it is here. So let us now see some variations of the save command. Let's see the next slide. So I want to save all these objects. Say VF, I create an object called VF, VF.ln, VF.beta. I'll save these 3 objects, 1, 2, 3. Then I'll save it in a file. Then I will specify the location and the file name. And the extension is going to be .r data. So this is going to save this object for me. Then I can use I can put everything inside a list. But here I'm using, I want to save it based on a pattern. So give me so save this guy into, call all the what I want to save into a list, but I want all the objects that follow this pattern. So what does this mean? I want this to save all the objects that start with PF. So, and I want to call the file as file underscore name.argdata. So basically this should do the same thing that this guy is doing. So this is going to save every object that starts with PF, for example. But here, like, you want to save everything in your workspace. So you want to save all the objects you have created. Say ls into bracket all is equals to true. Then file is equals to file, you specify the file name. But this one might not necessarily be it might not be necessary. All equals true. You might not necessarily have to put it. Just put ls, then put the brackets, and it's going to save everything. You just need to actually put all this equals to true. So, say for example, let me see the list of objects I have in this. So I can use ls. So it's just a that I have. So if I want to say okay, ls, maybe using that guy that we just saw, pattern is equals to starting from A. You can see it still gave me A. So let's say, for example, I create an object AB. So what is A, for example? Like what is A? A is 5. So I want to say an object AB is equals to 1, is equals 1 to 5 plus or times A. So I have AB. So let's say I want to create an object C, which is equals to let's say a matrix 1 to 20. Number of rows is equal to 4. Then I want to say C is now equals to C times 5. So let me call the ls command to see what I have in this guy. So I have A, B, C, employees, and file name. So why didn't it show me on this one? Okay, it's already showed me before. So let's say, and I want to run this command now. So give me the list of objects that start with A. So obviously it's going to give me A and AB. So let me run this. As you can see, it was A and AB that it gave me. So if if I need maybe object that ends with S, then I just have to put, I should be able to put this. Let me see what this one gives me. Maybe not this. Maybe this is not the way I'm supposed to write it. Let me use this. I don't know how this really works. So as you can see, this gave me all objects that ends with S. So let me put a B. It gave me all objects that ends with a B. So any which way you want to put it, it's all good. I hope this is well understood. Yeah, I hope this is well understood. So let me use the save command for us. So let's say I want to save this, save, then my list is equals to ls, then pattern. So those that start with A. So let me save those files that start with A. Then I'll put into a file called my object dot So this I already saved this guy into my current working directory. So let me see whether it's here. It should be here. As you can see here, my object.argdata is already here. Now, so let's say I already save this, and maybe apparently I save this object because they are important to me, and maybe unfortunately I close my R session, or the objects were removed. See, let me just remove them. So all these objects will remove A and AB. So if I should save A now, I won't find the object. I say AB, I won't find the object. And I want to work with this object. So since I already saved it, I should be able to say, okay, load, load, I'll just put my object data. So they have been loaded. Now if I should call A, if I should call A, as you can see, A is 5. All that's 5 to 25. So I have my object back. So that's the essence of having to save your object so that you can be able to work with it later. I hope that is well understood. Hello, are we there?
Sorry, let me get something. The save list equal to ls pattern, is it just a command before the file? Everything on that list is a command.
This one, right?
I'm not seeing your screen yet. It's like there's a lag between your talk and the screen. I don't know. Maybe it's from my end.
So let me change my network. Are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing my screen now?
That's what I'm talking about. Is that all a command?
This one?
Yes. The list
Everything.
pattern.
Yes. So this pattern, so no, it's supposed to be pattern. So this one is saying that I want to save some objects. So I want to put it inside a list. This is like put it inside a list. So like combine everything together. So based on ls is one that
lists
that list objects you have, right? So I'm putting a parameter inside. Give me the object that starts with A. So combine this and put it inside the list. Then file is specified like, okay, save it as this file. Then with extension R data. Are you too?
all right.
So that's why it saves that as this guy. But I can actually use those objects manually. So if I don't want to use this guy, maybe it's just 3 objects. You can just type in say object ABC. I'll just put saves into bracket A, comma B, comma C, comma file is equals to this. So it depends on how it's going to be for you to save this object.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. So okay, I think this one is clear. So let's go to the next slide. So implementing the save command. So save the entire current session. Then you can use this save document to save to your entire session instead of having this. So for saving data to this as just data can be transferred out of app using divide the table, write the CSV and stuff like that. I think we already explained this guy. So for a single vector of values, you can just use the write command or cat command can be used. For data frame or tables, you can use the write the CSV or write the table to do that. So apparently, I think we have finished this this slide. So let's go to the second presentation, which is manipulating and processing data in R. Okay, so what are the objectives we want to achieve today? So we want to understand the 3 subset operators in R, perform data manipulation functions like subsetting, sorting, and merging data in R. All right. So deciding the appropriate data structure, depending on what you want to work on, R has the ability to manipulate data and enable its subsequent analysis and visualization. So you have like 4 basic containers in R, like vectors, which is the most simplest one, is the one-dimensional data, and we have seen how that works out. You can use a combine function to create, or using a sequence function to create this a one-dimensional data like vectors, and it can only contain one data type at a time. Then matrices, we know all matrices are a two-dimensional array. So rows and columns. But like vectors also, they can only take one data type at a time. You can only take one data type at a time. So talking about lists. So before I talk about lists, let me go to data frames. So data frames is used for representing data from spreadsheet data, like your Excel data, your CSV data, your data in dictionary database. So those are the kind of data you have in data frames, where you have a column is unique to a data type, and every column can have so a column is unique to the data type. A column can only be a number or a character or a date, but a data frame can contain several data types, but each column is unique to its data type, and they must be of the same length. So list is like a bag, a basket that can contain several other containers. So inside a list, you can have a vector, you can have a matrix, you can have a data frame inside it. So it can contain anything. So used for high dimensional data like customer data information of an organization. So we're going to see how we can call on this. So there's this particular command you can use to import JSON format kind of data. So if I want to read JSON format kind of data into I can use read underscore JSON. So read underscore JSON to read JSON format kind of data. But before I can use this, there's a library you have to load into the our environment. Is called JSON Lite. Let me see if I have it. I should be able to have it here. So JSON Lite. I don't think I have it. I don't have the package yet. So if I want to use it, I have to install the JSON Lite library. But moving on. Creating subset of data. So there are so many ways of having where you should be able to subset data. We have the ampersand sign that uses $sign to subset data. We have the double square brackets. We have the single square bracket. So the $sign operator sets a single element of data. When you use this operator with the data frame, the result is always a vector. So for example, I have a data frame with like 10 columns, and I want to just call a single column out of it. Then I can just say, okay, let's say I have a data frame called employee. So the employee has like several columns like employee ID, first name, last name, salary, and the likes. So if I just want the first name of employee, and I can just say employees $sign first name. That is going to call the first column in that data frame. Also, similarly, you can use the double square brackets. This mostly work with a list. Is mostly used with a list other than data frames or matrices or vectors. It also works better with a JSON format of data also. So we have the single square brackets also, which work well with vectors, matrices, and data frame. So let's see how this works out. So to illustrate subsetting of data frames, let us look at the built-in data set called iris. But I will have to start with vectors. Let me start with vectors. So let me start with vectors. I'll go to my RStudio. I hope my screen is not lagging. Hello.
Yeah.
I said I hope my screen is not lagging.
No, but at some point, I think you left the meeting, then you came back.
Okay, let's say we have this AB data, AB vector. I want to call the first two vectors, the first two elements, but let me just start with the first element, or I just want to call a single element. So let's say I want to call the element in position 3. I just put AB, and inside the square bracket, I put 3. So index for ours starts from 1, but in Python it starts from 0. So if I want to call the third element, I use 3. So if I want to call the third element here is 15. So I'll just put 3 AB into square bracket 3. If I want this, gives me the third element, which is 15. Now, for example, if I don't want to call just a single element, I want to call several elements. So let's say you want to call the first, the third, and the fifth element, then I can do something like this. Put C, so into the square brackets, I put 1, 3, 5, means I want the first, the third, and the fifth element in that vector. So if I should want this, you can see the first, which is 5, the third, which is 15, and the fifth element is 25 was returned. But apparently, sometimes maybe you want to call the first three elements, then you can do this. Then you can do this AB into bracket 1, 2, 3. So I put a 1, I put a colon, and to 3. You know, it's like you're calling a vector 1 to 3. So it's going to call you the first 3 elements and return it for you. But apparently, I don't think in R you can call the last 3. Maybe there's a way you can just pick the last 3. And I think there is. I don't think there's a way you can do that. I really don't know. So, but let me try. Let me try something that didn't work out. Let me say 3. Let me turn this thing upside down. Maybe one way going to do something funny. You just turn it the way around. we didn't do what I wanted to do. Sorry. So apparently I don't think they do it. So that's how it works anyways. So I think I already talked about how you can exclude a particular number just using the minus sign. Just using the minus sign. So let's say I want to exclude, maybe I should be able to do that. Maybe the first 3, I want to exclude the first 3. Let's see whether this is going to work out this way. So the first 3, so let's see. Apparently I can't do that because I'm putting minus. Still, it's seeing this as minus 1 to 3. So which might not really work out that way. Let me put the bracket to that. It's going to make sense. Okay, yeah, it works. So you can see it exclude the first 3 and give me what the next 2. All right. So here, statisticians often have to take samples of data and they calculate statistics. So a sample is essentially a subset of the data. To create samples from the data, the sample command is used, then the number of samples to be drawn from that list is specified. So consider the example of rolling a dice to collect a sample of 10 simulations, use the following command. So what this is saying apparently is that, okay, sample into brackets, what data are you talking about? Okay, I'm considering a vector of 1 to 6. The second parameter is saying that I want 10 samples out of it. Replace equals to true is like I'm selecting with replacement. So if I have a number 1 to 6, out of 1 to 6, I'm going to pick a random number, say 3. So I pick 3. 3 is going to be my first element. Then I'm going to replace 3 to it. So I say I have 1 to 6. Then I go again. I pick at random a number from 1 to 6. Then I do this 10 times. You know how this works out, like sampling with replacement term. You know how this works out. So it's not like you're doing all those permutation and combination of the thing. Oh yeah, join samples elements with replacement or without replacement. So for example, I want to do this. So I have AB, which is 15 to 5 to 25. Okay, this is my data set. Now I want to get 10 samples from this guy. I want to get 10 samples from this guy. But having to replacement equals to true in this case. So I'll say sample, which data set am I considering? AB. I need 10 samples. You can see by default, replace is equal to false. So by default, replace equals to false, and probability is actually null. So if I should put replace equals to true, so I'll just put C. So it's going to give me 10 samples out of this AB at random. So you can see that, okay, the first element it picked is 15, replace it. Then it gave me 10, then it gave me 25, then it gave me 10. I have 10 samples in total. But then let me run this statement again. So let me run this again. You see, when I ran this again, it gave me another result entirely. So let's say, for example, you are running an analysis, you are trying to build a model, and you are working on some kind of large data set. You're going to do test train. You have a train set, you have a test set. The train is what you use to build your model. You know, when you want to use your train data set, when it's not like you're doing what's called you're not using a time series data. So if you're not using a time series data, you have to pick your train test set at random. So having to do this kind of a thing is going to be to your disadvantage, because you don't want to pick different train test sets multiple times. So maybe the first time you train your model, you got this sample. Then the second time you want to train it again, you are getting another sample entirely. You don't want that to happen. So in that case scenario, you are going to set a seed. So I'm going to set seed. So what I'm going to do if I want to achieve that result is to set the seed. If I set seed, I can pick any random number, say 23. So I set the seed equals 23. Now, me having to do this is that if I run this command, sample AB, give me 10 samples, the placement equals to true. I should run this guy now. So let me run this guy so you can see. You can see that I have this sample. Now, if I should run this again, you can see I have a different sample entirely. This it's not supposed to be true. I don't know why I'm having a different thing entirely. Okay, let me do that again. I have this. Let me run it again. You can see I have a different sample. So let me run set the seed again. Set the seed. Let me run this. I have this. So if I want to run it again, I will have to do set the seed again. Then I will run it again. So you can see that this result I have is the same thing as this result I have. So you have to use a particular seed so as to avoid different results at different stages. So that's the essence of using and set the seed. So moving forward, I think I explained what this already do. So you can see they've already explained what I was supposed to talk about in the next slide. They've already talked about it here, anyways. So moving on to the next slide. So here, talking about applications of subsetting data. So let us highlight some of the applications of subsetting data in R. To eliminate duplicate data from analysis, you can use duplicated function. So this is going to give you true for values that are duplicated. So this is how it works. It goes into the data set and it says, okay, the first number is going to be false, obviously. So if the second number if the next number is the same thing as the previous number, then it's going to give you a true value. But since 1 is different from 2, it is false. By the time it gets to the next one, since 1 has already occurred before, it's going to give you true. So it means that it's a duplicate. And it goes to 3, 3 has not occurred before, false. 1 has occurred before, it's true. So that is how duplicated function works. So it helps you to detect duplicate in the data set. So to find and remove rows with missing data during analysis, you can also use the complete the cases command. So this result of complete the cases is a logical vector with the value true for rows that are complete and false for rows that have some NA values. So there's so another way to omit missing data is to use the na.omit file name. So don't don't confuse complete.cases command with any.omit. So any.omit is going to remove where you have NAs, like it's going to remove those rows completely. But complete.cases gives you a logical value stating that this particular row has what a null value or none. So, but let's see how both of them works in this sense anyways. So I will just, so before I go back to this one, let me go to my house to do again. So I want to create a vector that has no values. So let me say vec equals to CAB, comma 4, comma, what am I typing? I'm not typing anything. So VEC is C command into AB, comma 4, comma 15, comma NE, comma 25, comma NE. Yeah, let me run this. Sorry, AB, not AD. So VEC. So you can see I have a vector with 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 4, 15, NA, 25, NA. So for example, using the duplicated function. So VEC, apart VEC increase. So you can see false, 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 true. It turned true when it got to 15. Because 15 occurred before. 15 exists before. Then when it got to NA has not occurred before, so it gave me false. When it got to 25, it gave me true because 25 exists here before. Then when it got to the next NA, it gave me true because NA has occurred before. Okay, now I want to do something funny because it's not funny, it's actually interesting. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to put this. Let me put this inside this guy. Let's see. What? So you can see what happened. So this is another way of subsetting data. So this is going to give me vectors that are duplicated. So I put the duplicated function of vector inside the vector object itself. Like I subsetted it using a duplicated command so that it can return all those vectors that are duplicated. So it's just a common logic that I just used it. So the na.omit command. So the na.omit command is this. So VEC. So if you run this, you can see that it returns everything except what the NAs that I have here. That is na.omit for you. Now let me use the complete.cases for you. Complete.cases, then VEC. So you can see here, it gave me true for the values that are not null and gave me false for the values that are null. So if I can use this guy to subset VEC as I did here. So if I put VEC into square bracket, I should now put complete.cases VEC. This is going to give you the vectors that are not null, as you can see here. So this command is the same thing as this in this essence. So if you want to check that, you can use the function called identical. So I can say identical, then I put two things. If two things are identical, it's going to give you a true Boolean value. So then put any.omit, then sorry. So I put any.omit, copy, and put this then into bracket, comma, this guy. Put it here. If I want this, said it's false. So why is it false? So you can see this guy was 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 4, 15, 25. And it's the same thing as what I have here. So I don't know if what I have here is the same thing as what I have here. So, and I don't know why it's giving me a false, maybe because maybe their structure is different. Okay, their structure is different. Yeah, I get. I get. Okay, let me assign this guy to a vector. Say, let me assign it to an object. Say, okay, NA dot. Let me say DD. DD is equal to this. Okay, now let me put DD here instead. Or let me call DD. Let me look at what DD is. Okay, oh, it's actually going to be different. The structure is going to be, but the essence is that they're going to give you the same result. So what I'm trying to speak about in identical is that, so if I say identical, and I put it in that are identical, say 2, 2, it's going to be give you a true if they are like the same, but a false if they are different. And the reason why it's giving a false is that the structure is actually different, but the result is not the same. Is the same thing. So let me take the plus 10. And what I'm going to have. So it's added 10 to my DD, but it's not this any that omit doesn't really off, or maybe this guy gave me a vector as you can see like this, but this one gave me a different kind of structure. But if I want to convert it, I can say I should convert to a vector. Say DD is as dot vector DD. So let me call DD again. So you can see it's in its proper format like this in a vector form. So if I should do this identical again, you can see that it gave me true. So that's one way to do about that. I hope I'm not confusing anyone on this call. Are we still together?
Yes, Emmanuel.
I know I've done a lot of things that are probably not. Let me see whether. Oh, Petra is no longer. Okay. So adding calculated fields to data. So you can also do arithmetic on columns of a data frame. See how it makes it easy to perform calculations on columns of a data frame because each column is itself a vector. So let's us consider the example of data frame iris for illustrating equations on data frame. So we already have we have already imported the iris data. So iris data is an inbuilt data set in R. So here what they did is like, okay, give me separ.length in iris. Separ.length is a column in the iris data, and separ.width is another column in the iris data. So I want to do iris ampersand separ.length. These are going to subset columns in data frames divided by iris ampersand separ.width. So this is going to divide this particular column by this column, and it's going to assign it to the x variable. So let's perform that in our R session. So I want to call in the iris data set into the R environment. So I'll say data into brackets iris. So which is an inbuilt data set in R. If I should load this, it has been loaded into the environment. If I want to see the head of it, I can say head into brackets iris. Then I run this, you can see the head of the data set. We have separ.length, separ.width, beta.length, beta.width, and species. So beautiful. So if I want to call a particular column in that data set, then I can use the ampersand sign. So iris ampersand separ.length like this. So if I should run this command, I'm just going to see a single column, which is separ.length in a vector form. So these are the values of separ.length. So that's the way to subset a single column in a data frame. So if I want to call separ.width to just iris ampersand separ.width, then call it. If I don't want to do it this way, I can subset it like this. Say iris into when put in quote separ.length, then I have it in this format instead of in the vector form. I have it like this. So if you can also call it based on its index. So I can say iris, I want all the rows corresponding to column 1. Because separ.length is in column 1. Then I have it in vector form like this also, as compared to what I have here. So that's 3 different ways to call a column. And probably I want to call just more than one column, maybe the first to the third column, first, second, and third column, calling all the rows. I can write this. Then you can see here I have first, second, and third column like this, corresponding to all the rows. So if I don't need all the rows, maybe I need the first 5 rows, I can just say 1, 2, and 5. So this is going to give me the first 5 rows corresponding to what the first 3 columns. All right. So performing calculations, you can also perform calculations as they did on that slide. Say x is equals to then separ.length, x ampersand separ.length, say divided by iris ampersand separ.width. This is going to divide the corresponding elements in both columns. So I should run this, it has been assigned to x, as you can see my console here. So if you want to see the first element, I can say head of x. So these are the first 6 values here. So what we have is this divided by this, give me this, give me this, this divided by this, give me this, and so on and so forth. So that is by the way. So that explains this concept. Also, using the width and within command, you can also use width and within command within functions. So how do that work out? Now, if you see here, I have to do that. If I want to call this particular column, I have to reference the object itself, which is iris. So I have to reference the object itself, which is iris, to call that column. But using the width command, I don't necessarily have to write it out explicitly like this. So as you can see on my screen here, that I'm saying that y is equals to width. I'll specify the data iris, then I can explicitly just write the column I want divided the column that I want. So in this way, separ.length divided by separ.width. So I don't need to write iris ampersand separ.length divided by iris ampersand separ.width. So I can just write width. The iris data do this operation for me. Then I just assign that operation to what? To y. So let me do that for you so you can see. So this same operation I did here, I can just say, okay, y is now equals to, say, width iris. Then I can just get out this operation. So with iris do this. So if I don't need to put this iris ampersand, I'll just remove this. Then I'll remove this. So with Iris, do this operation for me and assign it to y. If I should run this, it has one. So obviously this result should be the same thing as this result. So how can I verify that? I can just say identical x comma y. You can see that it gave me true. So it's telling you that what is here is the same thing as what I have there. So basically that is by the way. So using the within function. So the within function is that okay, paraventure, that operation that I did, which is this divided by this, I want it to be another column in the iris data set. So I'll use the within function. So within iris, create a new column called ratio, which is actually equal to separ.length over separ.width. So that's going to add another column called ratio to the iris data set. I'll just say iris is equal to. So first of all, let's take the head of iris. You can see you just add this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So I want to add another new column called ratio. I'll say iris is now equals to within iris within iris. I want another column called ratio, which will be equals to separ length divided by separ width. I'll just copy and put this in. If I should run this command, yeah, that's one. If I check the head of iris now, you can see another column has been generated called ratio, which is separ length over separ width. And it has been added to the iris dataset. Does that make sense at all? Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Emmanuel, sorry, my attention is divided, but I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So moving forward, let's see. Creating subgroups or bins of data. So most statisticians often draw histograms to investigate their data. Given below is an example of an histogram. So the cut function creates bins of equal size in the data and then classifies each element into its appropriate bin. So let us use the application of cut function. So for example, to illustrate the implementation of cut function, let us say the built-in data set state.x77. So the cut function creates a bins of equal size in the data and then classifies each element into its appropriate bin. So we consider the column first from the data set. So let us see the application of cut function. So let's work with the state.xs data set. So let's data of state. Cancel that. Let me see the function. The state.xs. I can't see a function a built-in data set called state.xs. That's x77. It's not found. It's not found. But that doesn't mean we cannot illustrate a cut function. So a cut first, comma 3, comma include lowest is equal to true. So you want to so apparently you want to divide the values in the first column into 3 like equal sides. So let's see the next slide. Hold on. So let me use a colon in the array data set to do this. So, so, so let me see the range. Can I use the range to do that? So let me see, say IVs. So you can see here that the highest value in the separate event is 4.3. The lowest is 4.3. The highest is 7.9. So if I use the cut function, for example, cut. So let me specify this as my x. So I want to divide this into three subsets. So as it includes the lowest equals to true. So this is what you have. So this is what you have. So apparently this is what it does for you. So it creates three categories. So if you look at the three categories, now first of all, this is the range of our this is the range of our status of our separate of length. The lowest is 4.3 and the highest is 7.9. So what it does is that it creates a three intervals for it. So starting from 4.3. So you start from 4.3 like this. So 4.3 to you see that you have three categories. 4.3 to 5.5. Then you now have 5.5 to 6.7. Then you now have 6.7 to what? To 7.9. So you have three. So any value that falls in this range, it's classified into this range. So it means apparently what I'm saying that the first value in the separate length column in the array data set falls in this range. Then the second one falls here. Then the third value falls here, and like that. So with this, I can plot this guy using this range instead of having to use each data point. So I can just use this range to plot my histogram for this particular column using the cut function. So now you can see that you want to subset the first column to three intervals. Then I want to give the label. Say the starting point should be low, should be labeled low. The one that follows is like medium, or the one in the middle, somewhere like that, or average. Then high. So the first group is low, the second is median, and the third is high. So like we have here, I can also do that with this one. So this one will be called low, this one will be called med, and the one that is the last part, 6.7 to 7.9 will be called high. So I can do that with this guy too. So let me include the label. So say label is equals to low, median, and high. So you can see that they will be given those labels instead of these numbers that you are seeing, this interval that you are seeing. So they just give it this label automatically. So if I can call this one X is this. So I can just plot the histogram of that into the hist function. And I can just say plot X with type is equals to type is equals to maybe you have not gotten to that stage yet. So this one is saying table X. When we get to where we are going to plot using the plot function, we are going to talk about that. So after you assign it to X, then you can use the table to summarize what we have. So this is going to using the table command is going to give you, okay, how many values do you have to be low? How many ones do you have it to be called a median? How many you have to do you does how many values falls in the high level? You can see that you have three levels here: low, medium, and high. So I can say table X, for example. So you can see you say that 59 falls in this category, 31 levels falls in this category, 20 levels falls in this category. So that's what the table command does for you. So moving on to the next slide. We also have combining and merging data sets in R. So you can use R bind, you can use C bind, you can use the merge command. That one works well when you want to do your left join, your right join, your full join, inner join, and that. So you can add columns side by side using the C bind. You can add rows up and down using the R bind. You can see C bind side by side, then R bind like from bottom, like up to bottom. Then merge is like you're doing your left join, your different kind of join as you do it with SQL. So using the merge function, let's see which data set can we use here. And we don't have this data set that we are using here. So anyways, let's talk about the types of merge that we have. So we have the natural join, which is like your inner join. So to keep only rows that match from the data frame, specify the argument all is goes for. So while the full outer join, we select all the rows in A with all the rows in B and match them together using the columns that correspond to both of them. Then you have the left outer join, then you have the right outer join. So if you are doing left outer join, you say all dot X is equal to true. X is the one at the left. If you are doing right outer join, you say all dot Y is equal to true. Please join based on select all the values in the get to your right and match it to what corresponds to your X. So let me try to illustrate the concept of C bind and R bind. So let me use I think I have a vector called AB. Okay, so there is a vector called C. This one is a matrix, but it doesn't matter. So let's say I want to bind this. So let's say that I can combine this guy to this guy. Let's see C bind AB comma C. Let me see if I can do that. It said warning, number of rows of results is not multiple of vector length. So the reason being is that this guy, I want to C bind. This guy has 4 rows. So if I'm doing a C bind, it means I want to transpose this AB and put it by the side of this guy. But this guy have 5 entries because on a row level here, I have 4 rows, so there's no way you can append it to the side. So let me try and remove one value from this AB. So let me remove maybe the first value. So AB, let me say AB is equals to AB excluding -1. And this excluding the first value. Okay, so let me do the C bind again. As you can see, it has been added. So this is AB. This is this not this place. So this is our this is our C bind now. So this is our C bind now that has been properly added. You can see. So let me call AB for you so I can see what is inside AB. This is AB 10, 15, 20, 25. So you can see 10, 15, 20, 25 has been added to this place. And this is our C. So where's our C? Let me call C. So this is our C. 5, 10, 15, 20, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, up to what? 100. So this is our AB, and this is our C, which is this matrix. So you just combine the two together. But here, you can see that it's actually joined them together, but it's excluded my 25, which is my original AB. You didn't put 25 there, it's just cropped it out, because, and that's why it's giving you this warning message that though I've joined it, but the last part of this AB wasn't inserted because it doesn't match your second variable, which is C. So apparently that's how you can do a C bind. So if I want to use a row bind, now AB now, we want to do a row bind with C. My AB has four entries. My C has how many entries? How many columns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I want to row bind this with AB, it won't match, because this one has 4 columns, this one has 4 values. So if I want to append it from the bottom, so it's going to go from here to this place, to this place, to this place. But since this one has 4 values, there's nothing to match with this guy. But let's see what it's going to give you. So I'll bind C with AB. It's going to give you a warning. You can see I gave you a warning. So what it actually did is that, you know, our AB is 10 to 20, 10 to 25. So this is 10, this is 15, this is 20, this is 25. Since he didn't find anybody to match here, he just started from the beginning again, which is 10. Just use that first 10 to complete the matching, to give you your results. So that's why it gave you this warning that that's not something to the combination anyways. So do you understand how bind and C bind now? Before we go to the merge function.
Yes.
Okay. So talking about the merge function, we are going to use what can we use? Okay, let me go to the next slide, whether we're going to see something. What can we use to do a match? So let me talk about the match function. So you have your X, your Y. Your X is a data frame, your Y is another data frame. Then there are some optional commands you can put into place depending on what you want to do. So let me talk about that. So if you want to do natural join, which is like your inner join, and this is how I would write it. Merge X, Y. My X is a data frame, my Y is a data frame. If there are 2 common columns, to merge the both of them, how is going to understand that and help you to do the merging automatically without specifying that column? That's if they have the same naming convention. But if not, or if not explicitly specified, you can use by equals to something. But if these 2 columns, if the column in X and the column in Y are using to match, they have different naming convention. So I'm going to specify like this: by.x is equals to a particular name, say X, Y, Z. Then maybe the column that matches in Z in Y, we say Y dot Y is equals to ABC. Then this is going to join X and Y based on these two columns that matches in X and Y correspondingly. This concept of natural join. If you are doing a left join or left backward join, as you see, you are going to say merge. Then you specify your X, specify your Y, you specify the column that you're using to join for X and Y. If they have different naming convention, you are going to do it this way. If it's the same, then just specify by. So let's say you are joining employees and department table, you can see by equals to see department ID. If they have the same naming convention, let's do this. Since you are doing left join, I'm going to say all dot X is equals to true. Now, if you are doing a left join, a right join instead, I'm going to say merge, and I'm going to copy this, put it here, then put all dot Y equals to true. But I'm doing a full join. So this right. What I just need to specify is that I'm going to copy this. Then put here, I'm going to say all is equals to true instead of all dot X or all dot Y. So all is equals to true. That's what I'm going to specify. Then that's just the concept of doing all those joins. So I believe you are clear on this. Okay. Now, okay, yeah, let me talk about this. So, in case a full merge is not required, a lookup table can be used as follows. So, what this one means is that, let's say I'm trying to do some kind of merge with two columns, for example. So, I'm using I want to merge two tables. So, let's say I'm using department ID in table A and department ID in table B. Let's say employees table and department table. So I might want to look up to the rows or the index that actually form a match between those tables. So I can say, okay, employees ampersand department ID, comma, department ampersand department ID. Do a match between them. So give me the ones that actually matches. So this gives me index 1, 4, 5, 6. That okay, these are the ones that have a match. So this one that gave me N, it means that this one there's no match code. So just give me those indexes. So that's you having to do this working with lookup tables, try to find out does this guy actually match to so you can try to see something out of that. So also sorting and ordering data. So how do you sort? How do you sort? So so this one is just a command to create a data frame. Say if we have two vectors, for example, I can create data frame using this command, say data frame into brackets, then specify the vectors inside it, then it just convert them to a data frame. Okay, so let's say for example, so merge uh, I only have one vector. So I have AB. So let me get another vector, say AC to be equals to 1 to 5, 1 to 4. So I'll just say data frame, data.frame of AB, comma AC. Now, if I should want this guy, you can see it has been converted to a data frame automatically using the two vectors. I have just arranged it automatically. Now, sometimes if it doesn't have the same length, you notice now AB has four lengths and AC has 4 lengths. Let me create an AC that has 5 lengths, so 1 to 5. So let me run this command again. So it gave you an error. Say arguments imply differing number of rows because the length of those vectors are not the same. Now, let me give a tweak to it. So let me say seed bind. Let me write a seed bind inside the data frame before doing converting to a data frame. You can see it created it for me, but it didn't give me an error. So what just happened is that you can see here to complete AB, the C bind had so AB stops here. The C bind had to start counting from 10 again to complete to combine these two together, then just convert it to a data frame. Though it came with a warning, so this is to tell you that something has been done at the background to help you to complete this command. So that's by the way. Okay, so if I want to sort now, let's see in the next slide. So I can say, okay, sort. So vectors can be sorted in ascending or descending order in R as follows. So this, I'm considering a vector here, say sort, blah, blah, blah. So let's use the sort function. So if I want to, so let me call AB again. AB is already sorted. So let's say I want to sort AB, but so I can just say descend, decreasing is equals to true. Let me just put it C. You can see it starts from 25 to the biggest to the lowest. Start from the biggest to the lowest. But let me convert this data frame and assign it to variable, say df. So let me call df. So this is df. So this is df. Now let's go to our slide again. Okay, this is just sorting in ascending order without specifying decreasing equals to true. Then this one does in descending order. So let's go to the next. Here now, so data frame can also be sorted in ascending or descending order in R. For sorting data, the order of the elements of the data frame can be seen as follows. So here now, you say order does population is order into some does state apart from population. So what this one is going to give you, I'm going to tell you what this does. So this one is now sorting, is calling some does state using this index that is already assigned to what population that's already ordered. So you are calling some states based on this index. But let me show you what that means. So let me go to the next slide and I'll just come in. So let me show you what that means. So let me use the order function. Order, so let me do order into brackets. Say AB. So I use AB. Yeah, let me see. You can see it gave me 1, 2, 3, 4. But what is AB itself? 10, 15, 20, 20, 25. It's already in ascending order. So that's why this number follows order like this. But let me create a vector that is not in order like this. So let me create a vector called, I think I have a vector BEC. Yes. But no, let me create another vector. Let me create another vector that does not follow a particular order. So let's say 1, 5, 3, 4, 6, 3. So let me run the order command, the order of BEC now. So look at this. It's telling that this is the order 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let me call BEC originally for you. You can see this is BEC. 1 is 1, that is in position 1, that is like the way it is now if you're following a particular order. Now it's saying that okay, this is the position 2. This does not make sense. This does not make sense at all. 3, 4, 5, 6. So it does not really make any sense. So this other function is behaving missed in disorder, not in orderly manner. So I want to actually get a grip of it very well. So let me create this vector this way so that I won't have duplicates. Okay, let me run the order again. Okay, let me call BEC. So it's telling that this is the first, this is the second, and this does not make any sense at all. So this does not make any sense at all. So I don't know why this should be the order of that particular data set. It does not make sense. You understand what I'm talking about at all?
I'm trying to follow you.
You are trying to follow, don't try to follow, try to understand. Try to understand. So this is not making sense. So that's the point I'm trying to join. That if I'm using this order function, it's supposed to give me this index in ascending order. So it's at 1, okay, I believe 1 is 1. The next number I have is 3, and that's supposed to be 2. The next number is 4, and that's supposed to be 3, which is correct here. The next number is 5, supposed to be 5. So is this 6 and 3 that it's interchanged the value in a way? This 6 is supposed to be the last number, supposed to be the last order. And that's why I really don't understand. Let me put this to be 2 now. Let me put this to be 2. Okay, let me find the order now. Let me call BEC. Okay. It's still not making sense. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's still not making sense. So let me have a feel of that. So if I should arrange this guy in 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, okay. I think I'm getting to understand now. So so if this is the vector I created, this is just the normal position of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 is 1, 5, so 2 is supposed to be 4. If it's followed that particular order, 2 is supposed to be 4. Is that what is here? According to what I have here, 2 is not 4, 2 is 3. 2 is 3. 2 is 3. So 3 is supposed to be 5, but 3 is 2. So it's not really making sense again. It's not really making sense again. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So, but then it's pretty well. You can do some research as regards that over time. I think I wanted to stay the time. So, moving on. Traversing data. Traversing data. I don't think we're able to finish this today. You're going to talk about the apply, T apply, L apply, S apply, and relax with that. So, but then I think next week Friday we'll be able to deep dive into all these functions very well. So see you next. I think we're able to cover at least 4 sessions. This is the 5th session you are entering. So let us continue from the next week. So